Welcome to Series 53, everyone. We have a phenomenal game that we are covering this series, Nova by Spencer Campbell, a twice Emmy nominated RPG, and it is just so good. So we can't wait to get to character creation for that. So we actually don't have any real announcements right now for this episode. Just check back with us in the call to action to hear about our latest Patreon offerings, some Patreon shoutouts, and more of just me since Amelia is not feeling well for this cold open recording. Enjoy the show, everyone. Welcome to Character Creation Cast, a show where we discuss and create characters, the best part of role-playing games, with guests using their favorite systems. I'm one of your hosts, Ryan, and this episode, my co-host Amelia and I are thrilled to welcome Spencer Campbell, indie groundbreaker, award winner, and creator of the game we are covering this month, Nova.
Welcome to Character Creation Cast. We are really excited you're here. I am particularly super excited. I know we've wanted to cover this game for a while. I think it's been on our list.
Oh wow,
so I'm super excited.
Ooh, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm also very, very excited. I love your show. I absolutely love your show.
Oh, good. Well, I love your games, so
this worked out perfectly.
Wow.
You got games in my show. You got shows in my games.
I was first introduced to this show when you did your Spire episode a ways back, because I'm obsessed with Spire. I think it's
such a good game.
It's so good. The system is good. All of it is very good. And so I was like desperately trying to find Spire content online to just like put more into my brain. And your show was one of the first things that came up. And I was like, oh, not only do I get more Spire, but I also get, exactly like you said, the best part of role-playing games, just making the character.
Right, just the beginning.
So
the part that all of us do and then don't ever get to the game. Yeah, which reminds me, now I don't know if we'll put this in the show or the outtakes or whatever, but I was told by one of my friends to ask you about your new game that you're working on, because that one also uses resistance, doesn't it? Or kind of.
Yeah, so or
am I thinking of something else?
No. I am like in the cusp of like making my next fantasy game, which is it's Lumen, but I'm going to borrow elements of the resistance that I like a lot, especially the dice pool system. The idea of like building a pool out of skills and domains and things like that is awesome to me. I'm still going back and forth on whether or not I want to do my sped up version of how Fallout is resolved compared to base resistance. I may do that, may not. I don't know. I'm going super back and forth.
So many fiddly bits to like decide. That's the part of like game design that I just can't like wrap my head around how people do it, is like all of those little tiny decisions. I just get so overwhelmed by them. I'm like, as a broad concept, here's what I want to do. Yeah. Why isn't it doing that?
just be now. Just
do it. I decided on a thing. Like I made 2 choices and I don't understand why it's not working.
I end up making a list of like way too many choices, and then I go, what have I done? Because I do truly like to make simple and fast games, and so it's for me, it's always like way overshoot and then like chisel until it becomes a thing that I want. So I overproduce in my own head and in my Google Docs, and then I literally talk myself out of doing the things that I've written down. That's my process, is to go, okay,
I love
past Spencer had an idea. It's not a bad idea. It's just not the idea we need right now. And current Spencer will fix this.
Maybe Spencer could put that idea over here for another time.
Exactly.
I love that. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about yourself? I know, and you're working on lots and lots of projects. So anything else that you'd like to plug or tell people about?
Sure. So I'm Spencer Campbell. You might be familiar with the publishing name that I use, which is Gila RPGs. I've been designing role-playing games out of Chicago for about 2.5 years now. My very first game was called Score, which is a homage to my love of crime. A lot of my games are about crime, it turns out. I have a brand.
Crime is fun.
It's very fun. And if you've heard of some of my other games, it's likely going to be Slayers, which is my fantasy Monster Hunter game in a cursed city. I also created the Lumen system, which is what we're talking about today, is based off of. And it's a power fantasy SRD that I created to emulate video games and power fantasy vibes and stuff like that. And it turns out a lot of people liked it and made stuff, which was the coolest feeling in the world, to see other people make things for your stuff. So that's generally who I am and some of the stuff that I've done.
Very cool. I heard like nothing but Lumen for like there was like a couple of months where like that was all of my circle of people was talking about, was like Lumen and all the things that they were going to do with it. And it was like, okay, I probably should look into this. And now, like months and months later, like we're finally getting around to it. But like
inevitably,
people were super excited about it. Like, and I see why, having read through it now. But like, it was like, wow, okay, like this is clearly something that I need to figure out, because it was really popular really fast, it feels like.
I'm sure we'll talk about this, but it was, it came together very quickly because it was fueled out of rage and spite when I designed it. And so
all the best things are.
So that creation process made me make it very quickly, and other people rode that wave with me, and it just kind of carried for a while, which was good.
That's
amazing.
Awesome.
Well, I am really excited to learn about this game. So let's go ahead and get into this, and we can start by discussing what this game is all about.
What's in a game?
So what is the core concept of Nova?
So Nova is a power fantasy combat sort of game that where you take place as exosuit pilots in a world where the sun has exploded, which is normally a pretty bad thing. Turns out it's bad for the game of Nova as well. So the sun explodes and it crashes down these shards of sunlight into the planet. And you play as these pilots that are fueled by these sun shards. And you go out into the dangerous, haunted, twisted world that comes from a sun exploded planet to try and bring back technology, revive your city, and what I say, bring a new dawn.
I like that.
Yeah, I love the concept of like the sun shard. Like, I don't know why that is the part that grabs me. It's just like, what is it? What does it do? Where did it come from? Why do we have it? Like, I really like those little bits where it's just like one, like the little bit of a word of like sun shard. It's like, oh, cool.
Yeah, the very earliest forms of what the world of Nova came from was years ago, like I think 2018 or something. The 200 word RPG contest that's held every year. One of the themes, it might have been 2018 or 19, was the sun is dead. And from that, my buddy Mike Riemann, who has done the art and layout for a number of my games, like Slayer's Almanac most recently, we just sat there and talked about like, what would it be like to be in a world where the sun exploded? And we went down this wild path, and like the sun shards and the sun wells and these ideas kind of got early percolation from that. Trying to take all that to 200 words was a challenge, but just the early like groundwork for what this world would be came from Mike and I just sitting on a Sunday morning, drinking coffee, going like, wow, what would happen if the sun was not just gone, it exploded and rained down on us.
Yeah. Which it gets a little bit into our next question, which is what kind of setting do you play in? Are there particular things that you really wanted to highlight about this kind of world? Like you mentioned the difference between just like not having a sun and the sun having exploded. Like what parts of that did you really want to play around with?
Yeah, because you hear that the sun explodes and you go, well, game over, right?
Right. Okay, why is this book 70 some pages?
So you have to do a little bit of hand wavy science explanation for it, which I'm always fine to do a little hand waviness with that. And the what I think is special or different about it is certainly a post-apocalypse game, but it is one in which the world, the setting that you kind of base yourselves out of is actually extremely advanced, because the idea is shards of the literal sun have planted themselves into the surface of the planet, and cities were built around them. And, the concept of a Dyson sphere where we like capture a star and harvest it for infinite energy, like this is basically that, but at a much smaller scale, at like a city scale. So like a city powered by a shard of the sun would rapidly advance in technology and things like that, which is why you get these really powerful and interesting mechs that the characters play as these sparks, because suddenly we are way more powerful and advanced than we'd ever been before. We just have to worry about everything that goes past the sunlight into the dark dusk outside of it. So it's an interesting kind of combination of really advanced, powerful sci-fi going on and horrifying post-apocalypse gloom and doom. Everything, anything out in the shadows is, we have to really hope that this technology is caught up enough to fight whatever's out there.
Right. Yeah, it's a really interesting dichotomy. And I think like the light and dark of it, and like getting to play with both and having it be directly related exactly to light and dark is a really cool concept.
Yeah, and these characters are extremely powerful, right? And that's a big part of the Lumen system and everything like that. And so you feel powerful when you're building the city and imagining everything that's inside of it. And then the GM gets to have the fun of going, okay, well, I have this big, weird, mysterious horror zone that is 90% of the planet. So let me think about what I can do that would make you go, oh, maybe we're not as ready for this as we thought we were.
I thought it was so cool, but maybe.
I'm getting some like eldritch horror feels from the darkness.
Yeah, I loosely allude to this sort of stuff. Like there's going to certainly just be baddies out there that are just like maybe the baddies you're used to. But then you also have to imagine that a planet where the sun has gone away is going to start to like twist and turn the life that lives outside of it. And so you get these elements of like beasts that are out there that are very strange. And there's a cult that worships the moon, because naturally if the sun is gone, then the moon's going to be our next best thing in terms of like celestial bodies to worship. And so you're going to get this really creepy, gnarly moon cult out there. And then I've got mean birds in my games, because I have a brand that is also, if not crime, I love crows. And so I have a faction that has appeared in multiple games and has started to appear in other people's games called the Corvus Dominion. They're this weird avian alien species, and they were on our planet when the sun exploded, so they're stuck here with us and they're not happy about it. So you've got moon cults, you've got twisted beasts, and you've got angry alien birds who are also very advanced, all vying for the very few sun shards that are out there, wanting this resource, this technology that is the only bastion of life on the planet.
Oh, that's really interesting.
And I think about like all of the creepy stuff under the ocean where the sun isn't.
Oh no.
Like I'm just like, as we're doing this, I'm thinking of all of like the gross Descent into Midnight conversations we've had about like creatures that can't see the light, like, and like don't, plants that don't do photosynthesis because there is no sun, and like,
or sun shards at the bottom of the ocean.
Right. Like what suddenly happens to these creatures that have never been exposed to the sun before, when now there's this like furious power and light in their environment? Does it cook them, or do they change? And I'm going to say they change, right? That's way more
interesting. That's cooler.
Absolutely.
For sure.
And then sun shards on the moon. That moon's got to look wicked amazing in the sky.
Like the moon,
it's probably all spiky.
I imagine the moon is kind of ever present in the sky now, because it's got all these, it's pockmarked with sun shards. So it is kind of this weird, like semi-glowing thing in the sky, which absolutely would encourage people to go, well, that's our new thing. That's the thing that we, we love.
All right. Wow.
Oh, that's amazing. So what tools do we need to play this game then?
To play the game, you need the book. You need some character sheets. There's a reference sheet too, which I always like having a nifty reference sheet. And then in terms of dice, you only need D6, six-sided dice. That's the only dice that I use. That's truly all that you need. But I know that some people we'll talk about this. Nova uses theater of the mind as a space for combat. We don't use a grid necessarily, but I know that different people have different abilities to visualize components in their mind's eye. So I recommend that maybe grab a sheet of paper and some tokens or something to represent where things might be on a battlefield if you need that sort of stuff. I've also seen plenty of people who like to use tokens for health and fuel, which is the two main resources in the game, rather than like erasing and writing on your sheet again. Like use some fun tokens. But truly, just to hop in, somebody's got to have that book to have read it, and some character sheets and some 6-sided dice, and you're ready to rock and roll.
Very cool.
I have to say, I'm a big fan of quick reference pages. Like, I'm on record on our show too, talking about how, like, I think books that are more than like 25 or 30 pages should have a rules reference at the beginning, so I know what I'm getting into. But I like that you have one that's just like the 1-page reference guide that, like, because my brain is like, okay, here's what I actually need to know right away, and then I can dig into the rest of it as I see fit.
Exactly. I mean, so I before I got into role-playing games, I was really into board games, still really am into board games, and I was trying to design them as well. And so I know how important once a board game becomes even just slightly complex, having a quick reference card or something like that each player can have in front of them will just immediately smooth out a lot of the hurdles that you're going to run into. So having seen it be so important in board games, it felt like you gotta have something like this in a game. Even if
because board game rule books are only like 10 pages, and that's too much, so.
Right? Like, even if I, in my mind, imagine Nova as a rules-lite game, that doesn't mean that it's inherently like easy and you can hold everything in your brain, right? You're going to want that sheet there, so you shouldn't have to hold all this in your brain. Right. Nobody should have to do that.
Well, especially the first couple of times, too. You know, like, it's when you get into a campaign of a game, usually by like the 3rd or 4th session, I'm like, okay, I've got this. But yeah, in that first couple, it's like, okay, hold on. How do I roll initiative again? I don't remember.
And like, I wrote the game and I still need it, right? Like, I look at it and I go like, okay, so which iteration of Lumen is this? Because I did it different in every single game I've ever made. So it's nice to have.
What kind of stories and themes were you hoping people would explore with this game? We talked a little bit about like the light and the dark parts, but are there other things that you were really hoping people would use this to look through and work through? So
Nova at its core is a power fantasy game because it is designed with Lumen, which is a power fantasy system. So it is designed for your characters to feel powerful. You are designed to go out as these very powerful, cool mechs, and you're going to face these horrifying things that we've just been talking about, but you're also going to succeed. And that's a big thing that I like to make that clear ahead of time with some of my games. The players are here to win, and the GM is here.
Oh, so it's not Warhammer then?
It's not Warhammer, and it's not adversarial where it's GM versus players. It's these players are going to go have a really cool, fascinating, challenging but interesting mission that they're going to go on out into this dark, but the GM is not there to stop them from doing it. They're not there to kill them. In fact, you can't die in Nova. I've made a rule that makes it very, very hard for you to die. So that more so it is about going out into this world that is dark and horrifying and trying to accomplish things that will help make things better. Like, the tagline of the game is to bring a new dawn, which has an inherent in that this concept of, okay, we are going to overcome this. We are going to succeed. It's just there's going to be these kind of terrifying things that are going to stop us or try to stop us. We will do it. That new dawn will be brought. It's just a matter of what we're going to have to do to make that happen. So my goal is to tell these powerful stories. Again, kind of leaning, since it's Lumen, it definitely leans into a more combat focus in it than other things. But that doesn't mean it's just fight. But it is designed to, when you get into a fight, feel very cool, and then go explore this dark world, and then get into another cool fight, and then explore this dark world, and you kind of cycle that again and again.
So the GM is there mostly to give you those things to fight and give you those things to explore, rather than to try and take you out, or, like, it's supposed to be a level of challenge, but not
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
overpowering.
It's not there to put a wall up. It's there to put hurdles. That's how I think about it. So the GM turn in Lumen is one that encourages the GM to add a twist every round of combat that forces the players to change the way that they think about how they're winning, because they're winning.
That's really cool.
They're going to win. So like, if you know that they're just pushing forward in this line, I'm going to just put a hurdle here. So you can either like fight over that hurdle, or you can take a different path. So my goal is just to like make you explore the concept of different paths rather than say, sorry, this is blocked off. This is a wall. You're not going any further with this.
I really like that because it makes each turn interesting too, right? Like I've read a number of like D&D adventures lately. And a lot of them are just like, okay, do this thing. And then this round, now it's harder. But you still are doing the same thing, but now it's a little harder. And it's like, okay, but like by round 5, aren't we all over this?
Right.
Like, I don't like, I hit it with a sword harder, I guess. Like, you know, like I want it to be like if we are going to do combat, because that's my biggest thing with combat not being interesting, is it's like, okay, I hit it with a sword and I hit it with a sword and I hit it with a sword. And it's like, so if something changes there every round and it like keeps it interesting, and it's like, okay, you can't do this again. Now what do you want to do? It makes doing a combat heavy game more satisfying for me.
Yeah, you know, I give an incredible amount of narrative freedom to the GM to do this GM turn, which is what it's called, which is to activate some of the enemies and then change the battle in some interesting way. And, you know, I provide some advice in the book, but I don't want to be too prescriptive when I do these sorts of things, where I don't want to say like, okay, and then put a barrier up. That's the common thing you do in round 1, and then reinforcements in round 2. I want you to think contextually, like what makes sense in the fiction for the enemies to respond, because they are facing these unbelievably powerful robots. And like, what will these enemies do desperately and fight dirty to try and stop these robots as best they can? You get to play around with
and
that.
it should depend on what the players are doing too, right? You know, like it doesn't make sense. It's like, okay, well now they move faster, and it's like, well, that doesn't make sense because I did, you know, like we messed with the terrain or whatever. And so I think having it be too prescriptive starts to not make sense either if your players aren't, you know, following that same prescription.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, we heard a bit about what characters do in the game already, going out and fighting insurmountable odds and winning.
I'm curious why they do that.
Yeah,
like, why is that what they're doing?
Is there a reason behind the characters fighting for that? And do you get any of that, like the downtime stuff?
Yeah. So there's mission generators that are in the game to help kind of contextualize why you're going out there. And so some things might just be, hey, we've picked up, our scouts have picked up, there's a moving force out there that we're worried is going to come to the city. And sometimes it's just like, we gotta head these people off before they come. These mean birds are going to try and steal our son. We need to stop them.
I hate when they do that.
Sometimes you need to do that. There's a lot of elements in the game that are about going in and recovering or protecting important things that are out there in the world that, you know, these sun shards only landed in some places, which means there's a lot of the planet that's still out there. It's desolate, but there could be valuable things there. Like, yes, technology has boomed around these cities, but we are also having to relearn a lot of what we have established as a species over the lifespan. And so there's knowledge out there, there's resources, and there's things like that nobody else can go out and do. The concept is the dusk. Everything that's outside of your city is so twisted and dangerous that to send a non-spark, a person without a robot suit on them out there is you wouldn't even consider it.
You wouldn't do it, yeah.
And so you are the only people who can go out there and try and find things that might be the elements that might start to help build up your city. And so, yeah, you asked that idea of like downtime. And that's the thing that the game encourages you after missions is to think about what did the city, how did it benefit from what you just did? Either, you know, there's no mechanical base building in the core game. So there's no like, okay, your technology level raises +1 because of this. It's more, why did we go out there? Like, which faction sent us out there and what did they gain from it? And then maybe because they've gained, did another faction lose out in the power structure of the city? And how are you as, in theory, a relatively neutral force in the city going to balance this total fight for resources and time and everything like that in a world where, technology is cool, but it's also really still scary out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you think? I particularly want to ask because it uses Lumen. And as you mentioned, like lots of people have taken and done things with Lumen. What do you think makes Nova unique in general, and then particularly among those games using Lumen?
One of my favorite things when people started making things with Lumen is, I released this SRD with like general thoughts about what this should make. And then every single person read it. And then a lot of my friends who read it and made things, they would reach out and say, hey, Spencer, cool SRD. I'm going to change X, Y, and Z. And every single time I went, perfect, good. You should
Great, sounds awesome.
You should not do it, word for word from the book. Make it your own. And so what I think makes Nova unique and kind of weird is that I wrote Lumen and then I made Nova, and I immediately made Nova with a huge change to how Lumen works. So Nova combat, there's zero rolling done. There's no rolling done in combat. Instead, your sparks have a suite of powers, and you are just spending fuel, which is a resource that you have that allows you to activate those powers. And so rather than thinking, is my attack going to hit? It will hit. It will absolutely hit. The question is, which power is going to help you the most or your team the most in this moment? And so combat is more about it's a puzzle solving sort of thing. I like to think of a lot of my combat games as more puzzle solving than just rolling and trying to get the odds in your favor, because again, the odds are in your favor. You're very powerful robots. So now how do you want to do this all the time? My mentality is, if I can give my players a button that says do something cool, I don't want them to just be able to push it once per fight or like once per session. I want them to just keep pushing that button. And so that's what Nova is designed to do. So I immediately deviated from the Lumen rules, which is, maybe roll for attacks and things like that. Instead, I just said, no, it will work. It's just choosing each round the thing that is going to help you in that moment, which then plays well with the GM turn, where they are now trying to think, okay, I'm learning what the powers are of these sparks. What can I do that's going to make them have to do a different power? So they're not just doing the same thing again. They're not just swinging their sword over and over. They're not just doing this same thing again. But now I've done something that sort of nullifies it or reduce its effectiveness.
Yeah, I really liked when I was reading through it, the concept of not having to roll for those powers, because it does really play into that power fantasy of like, oh, I'm good at this. Like, there's no question of like, can you do this? I can do it. It's just a matter of like, how much does it help me long term? And like, is this the right choice for the situation? It's not like, am I competent or not?
Yeah. And that's always been a thing that has frustrated me with other games, where there are these sorts of like roll to hit thing where you're like, well, if I'm like a level 12 fighter, I'm probably going to hit, right? Like, I'm pretty good at using a sword at this point. And,
like you would think, right?
Then you don't. And it feels weird.
It's like, this is my whole thing. I've trained my whole life for this. Like, this is what I do. Why can't I do it? And then it's like, and then why am I not having an existential crisis about that? Because it feels like that should be a mechanic too then.
Yeah, right? So that weird dissonance that gets created in the narrative, in the fiction at the table, when we have these moments where we know we're capable and then we just fail because probability dictates that every once in a while you're going to fail. So I didn't want that in Nova. I wanted to capture that concept of, you're gonna do it. It's just, is this the thing that you want to do? You've got 4 powers. Is this the power right now that you want to use? Or does one of your other ones help you in this moment? I like to think of it as a more puzzle-solving power fantasy thing, as opposed to you're always hitting because you just have a D20 and everyone else is rolling D4s. So I think that's the thing that makes it unique. The other big thing that I talk about a lot with Nova is that I consider characters in Nova to be level 20 characters. I consider you to be, you're there. You did it. You are the robot. And to me, I think about playing Nova and creating and changing your character with time as creating builds. So it's like a late game MMO sort of thing where you're like, okay, I'm max level. What gear do I want? And I know we're going to talk about advancement at some point, so I won't dive in. But like that concept of like which mods you choose to change your powers that's the play. Not I get more powerful. It's you are powerful. How do you want to be powerful is the question.
All of this is tickling my min-max brain.
Yep.
So much because like that whole like what is the best thing I can do in this very specific situation, and then what choices can I make to just up my ability and power just a little bit more, and how will that help in the future because of based on the missions that we've been going on and what's kind of on the horizon. Oh, that's so good.
It's folks will always come up with new interesting builds for Sparks that I couldn't possibly have predicted when I came up with the mods and everything. And so it's always fun to think like, this is my pyre, and my pyre plays by a really different way than maybe Spencer had assumed pyre plays. And that's cool. I love that.
Absolutely. So before we get into the terms and concepts and then character creation, we'd like to talk about the history of the game. So when did you start development on this? I know you were talking about the 200 word RPG that kind of sparked the whole setting and everything. But when did development on Lumen and Nova actually start then? Yeah,
so I had to do a little research because I knew this was one of the questions, and I was like, when did I actually start this? Because it flies and it blurs together because Nova is part of a line of Lumen games that I've sort of created that all kind of they fed into each other. And so trying to unravel that knot, I needed to do a little bit of research. So Nova, the concept of what would become Nova setting wise absolutely kind of originates from Mike and I's early talks from that 200 RPG. The concept of what mechanically and what would be developed into Nova came in March of last year. So March of last year, I released a Kickstarter for 5 hours, which was for a game called Frame.
Amazing.
Well, no, not amazing.
Oh no!
5 hour kicks. I've never heard of such a.
That would be kind of nice, actually, because I don't like doing long Kickstarters.
No. Yeah, I know. Like, how do you sleep for that whole month?
You don't. You just simply don't.
Okay.
So I made a game called Frame, which was my love letter to Warframe. And I created a Kickstarter for it, and then immediately apparently made the Warframe fans very mad. And they basically did a targeted harassment campaign against me.
Oh, no.
So I closed it after 5 hours because they had sort of invaded every social space that I existed on online. So
what did you do that made them so angry?
They have a deep belief that the property, the concept of like exosuits and things like that belongs to Digital Extremes and is theirs. And more importantly, that if they tell the company that this random indie RPG guy out of Chicago is making something that is an homage to it, that the company will love them. That is a thing that the company wants you to do, is be a snitch. And so...
What kind of corporate nonsense is that?
It was horrible. It was really, really bad. And I disappeared for a little while, and
wow,
I came back. Like I said at the beginning of this, fueled with rage and
furious.
And
I understand that now.
Wow.
And so I did like an interview with Chase Carter at Dicebreaker about it, and basically said like, gamers mean nothing to me anymore. I can't stand the concept of a gamer now because of things like this. And so I sat down and I said, well, I made a really cool game. Frame is a very cool game, and I don't want to just get rid of it. So what can I do with it? Let me strip away all the coat of paint that is going to make the Warframe people mad and move in a new coat of paint that is distinct enough that hopefully won't raise any riots against me.
Wow.
So in March, I started working on the early concepts of what would become Nova, because both thematically and mechanically, because it was an evolution of what Frame was. And Frame was very much this idea of you are these very cool, powerful exosuit people, and you're using powers all the time, and you're just spending tokens and resources to do that. And I said, that's really fun. Then we just put it in a new world. And so March is when Nova kind of began to emerge. And then I realized I need to codify this a little bit more. And so in April, I designed Lumen. So I made Lumen the SRD as a guide for me to go back to Nova. So I said, I need to kind of understand like why Frame was designed the way that it was, because I just wrote it. And so I gave it context by stripping out everything but the mechanics. And I said, this is Lumen now. This is the rule system by which Frame and my first game in the system, Light, was made. Now I can use this to build and create this concept of Nova. And so
that's so cool. So it was like backwards and then forwards.
Yeah, they kind of like it. So like cool. I said, the Lumen games fed into each other. Like technically the first one is Light, which is my homage to Destiny, and Destiny fans never came after me. They love Light.
I know, well, I was going to say, I have friends who are like all about it. Like, so Light came about. It's technically Lumen-like, but it was before I had even the idea of what Lumen was. And so that helped me make Frame. And then when I cut it all away, I said, okay, I think I could see the thing I was going for between Light and Frame. Let me transform that into this thing called Lumen. And this will be my guide. This will be my skeleton that I can build future games off of. And then Nova kind of very rapidly came together after that. It just flowed out of me. It was a lot of fun to write.
Absolutely. And that became like the Illuminated by Lumen.
Yeah, it sort of became the first one that got that phrase, that sticker slapped on it. And like I said, it's kind of weird because the core assumptions of Lumen are that you do roll when you attack. You're still going to most likely hit, but you're still going to roll. And to me, I was like, no. I just got to get straight to the very, very cool power stuff. And so it's been fun to not only see how Nova immediately deviated from Lumen, but how other things did too. And just, I'm always, like I said, I'm blown away with what people did with the system, because it is, I cannot even comprehend the amount of creativity and directions people have taken with it. It's very, very cool.
I love that about this community. Like there are certainly parts of like gamers in general and the RPG community that are like, but just the cool stuff that people make and the way that they take things like SRDs or even just hacks of games and like make totally different things that you're like, oh, you changed one rule and it looks nothing like the thing that I just made. And it's like the creativity is just, it's baffling to me. Like I want to be able to do that. Like, and I'm always shocked and awed at like the cool stuff that people come up with and the way that they take these things and are like, here's how it applies to like my world and my fandom and my cool concept. Like it blows my mind. It's so cool. It's so cool.
You know, I got my design start in like hacks and stuff like that. And so like to me, I understand how important it is to have resources out there that help somebody just jump right into design rather than saying, I need to make something brand new from scratch. And because that's overwhelming. And so a big philosophy for many of my games is to make it immediately hackable or really easy for you to make your own class or set a pack of monsters or enemies. So, and people, I still just randomly discover things. Like I just go, oh, here's a Slayer's class that I had no idea existed, but somebody out there was like, I really want to make a Slayer's class based off of blank. And then they do it. And I go, whoa, this is super cool. And exactly like you said, people can inject their own fandoms, the things that they're excited about, the things that they want to experience at the table. And if I just give them a very malleable skeleton, then they can do that.
And I love that about like indie design, especially that more and more designers are putting those SRDs out there and saying like, please, like, tell me about the cool thing that you've made. Because like, I know even making this show, like hearing people have like, like taken one of our concepts and then put it in their own game, or, that they found something through us. So like, I get so excited about that. And so I always like, it sucks when there's like bigger companies that are like, you can't put that out there. You can't share that because it's part of our game. And then all of these indie designers are like, no, please, like, tell me about the cool thing that you did. Like, I want to see what you do with it, because that's like my favorite part of like any kind of creative project is like knowing that it inspired somebody else.
Yeah.
And so I love that about the indie space and about the stuff like that you're doing and other people are doing with those kinds of things, and saying like, please, like, tell me the cool thing, like, tell me about what you did, because we just like all want to have a moment of like excitement together.
Yeah, it's I love it. I've been very fortunate to be part of some very cool communities in the indie RPG scene that just truly fuel one another. It's very nice, and it made it so much easier and approachable for me to even begin, considering getting into design, when I found people who build you up immediately and say, hey, this is the thing that you're really interested in. You should go talk to this person because they are also really interested in this thing. And then you find the people, you make the things. It's great.
Yeah. And I'm glad that like you've had, it seems like the total opposite experience now with Lumen and Nova that you had before. And that it didn't totally like ruin game design for you, because like, and that like would have been so sad, like, because now like looking at the things that you've done since then, like that would have just been like heartbreaking. And I hate that like that happens for so many people. Like there are so many people who don't come back from that, and it's such a bummer. It's such a bummer that like there are so many people who've had it ruined because people are garbage.
Well, and just to echo that sentiment of community, I had so many very close friends that I had made who are in the fellow indie designers, and the amount of outreach and support that came from them privately when I had stepped away from everything was just incredible. Like I wasn't just like, okay, I'm going away, and I'm just some random guy who's going away. Yeah. It's a lot of people were very kind, and that helped. But I am also a very spiteful person, so I was the likelihood that I was going to just step away and be like, no, I guess I'll just go away. No, I had to do something. So Lumen had to,
like, I have a point to prove.
Lumen had to be made.
I appreciate that. We are super close to starting our character creation, but before we do that, if we can go over some terms and concepts that you think people might need to know. I jotted down a couple as I was like looking through and trying to pick what kind of character I want to play. But if you have any others that you wanted to talk about before we start, so that people can follow along.
So a Lumen character is generally just a handful of components. One of those components are these three things, your attributes. A concept of Lumen is not that you have skills that dictate what you can do. The assumption, again, is that you can do pretty much anything because you're very capable, powerful people. So what's more important is how you do things. So there are three attributes that typically describe approaches to how you might accomplish a task. And so in Nova, they are sun, moon, and shade. Sun, it describes anytime you're doing something very powerful, sweeping, but also like highly emotional. Moon is going to be your quick, reactive sort of stuff. And then shade is going to be your slow, methodical, practiced sort of approaches to doing things. You can think about these both in and out of combat. So those are the way that you approach things. They also sometimes are linked to some powers. So some powers do damage, for example, equal to your sun. So if you look at your powers and you go, oh, this one's linked to sun, I might want to put a lot of points into sun so that I really hit hard with this power. That's a thing to consider. The other maybe like stat, so to speak, that you have, or you have health and fuel. Health is health. When you reach zero, though, when you reach zero, though, the difference in Nova is that you don't die. You actually activate your supernova, which is basically a failsafe that your suit has, which is an unbelievably powerful attack that your suit does to bring you back to life, and usually devastates everybody who was a threat around you. So you stand right back up next round after having sort of leveled the battlefield. So going to zero is not the end of the world. In fact, I have played with people who strategically get themselves to zero in certain points because they know this is the time I need to activate my supernova. So
I'd be one of those.
Yeah. So health is that. Fuel is your other thing, which is it's just a resource that you spend to activate your powers. So anytime you want to use a power, you spend 1 fuel to do it. All powers cost 1 fuel, and doing that just lets you do the thing on your turn. Both of those are also constantly being recovered in combat. It's like I said, this is very inspired by video games. You know how enemies in video games, when you kill them, they like drop health and ammo and stuff? That happens in Lumen. So when an enemy dies, there's a chance that they will drop fuel and or health for you to pick back up. So you are meant to just kind of keep going and keep going. So you're not worried about spending up your fuel, because you keep taking out some enemies, you're probably going to get some more fuel back. So those are kind of your stats. Otherwise, your character has a set of powers. They have a passive power, which is just there to sort of give you a sense of what your role generally is in the battlefield. So for example, Pyre just does damage to somebody that they're next to at the start of every turn. That lets you know that Pyre wants to be next to people, so that they can hurt people. And then you have 4 active powers. And these are the buttons that you get to push during your turn. These are the things where you go, which of these 4 powers do I want to do on my turn? And they're typically in the range of doing some sort of damage across the field, but not necessarily. There are also some classes that are in the realm of support or tanks, or, you know, more of that crowd control stuff. So you look and think, which power helps me in this moment? Those are the concepts of what makes up a spark. I think the other thing that might help is the idea of the ranges. So when you are, you know, these powers are defined by how far away something is. So things can either be close, near, far, in terms of like who they can target. Because like I said, this is all done with theater of the mind rather than measuring out squares on a grid or anything like that. So those will be some keywords to also be on the lookout as you're thinking about your powers. And that will help you understand, like, oh, this person seems like they want to be up close a lot, or this person tends to stay back, and they're mostly at that near and far range with their powers. The last concept are your mods. Like I said, it's about builds in Nova rather than leveling up. And so you have a suite of different mods that during character creation you can choose from, and you'll just keep getting more of these as you play. Some of these mods are just designed to be persistent. They are just there to give you like small little boons. So a little bit of health, permanent increase to health, or any of those attributes or anything like that. And then there are power mods that you can slot into your powers. Some of them are designed to help a specific power, and then others are just something like +1 harm. You plug that into any of your powers, and any harm that power does now does more harm. Or +1 range. If a power only hurt people at close range and you slap that mod into it, now it does the same effect at close and near. So that's what I mean by like, you create the build, you create the way that you function on the field that fits your vibe, and also what your party needs. If you suddenly realize you're all up close and personal, you go, okay, maybe I will take a range mod so that we can deal with something that's not always directly in our faces all the time. So
yeah, I love that they're super easy too, that they are just like, okay, it does this now, and it's like, cool, I can just make a little note that's like, this is +1, and like, they're super easy to slot in and like not have to look up 800 different things.
Yeah.
And I hate advancement in games where I'm like, okay, now what do I take? Where does it go? How do I, like, I can only increase 15% based on where I bought the skill, Ryan.
The goal is in the mods to not have to learn a bunch of new keywords or new elements to the game, but for these mods to enhance the core rules that you become familiar with, and then a matter of just tweaking your experience by shifting and changing mods throughout your sessions to go like, okay, I was playing with a lot of range, but I think we're like good on range, and I think I just want to hurt. Like, I want to just hurt more, so I'm gonna just take some more harm, or I'm actually burning through my fuel a lot, so I'm gonna take the mod that like this power doesn't cost fuel now, and things like that, so that you can just find the way that your spark will shine as brightly as possible out on the missions.
Very cool. I am super excited to dive into this and see what sort of sparks we create and everything. So are we ready to make some people?
I am ready.
Let's make some people.
I'm excited. there's a lot of options.
Mm-hmm.
I guess for myself and for the audience, what are our options for our sparks?
Yeah, should I do like a quick pitch of the spark options just to help out?
If you could, that
like
would
if
be
we could do like
really
a quick
helpful.
sentence or two about each of the choices.
So when I created these sparks, I came up with the first 4, and then the next 4 came after that, and I've described them in lore in the book as wave 1 and wave 2, where wave 1 was designed practically. We need these sort of sparks for these sorts of things in missions, and then wave 2 was now let's get weird, and so you'll notice that things take a twist in the second half of the spark options. So Pyre is going to be your in your face fighter, big flaming sword. They love to get up close and personal. So if you like kind of an aggressive fighter, Pyre is your choice. Scorch is going to be your sort of caster equivalent. So they summon fire from around the field. They do a lot of sort of like manipulation of the field too. Can play a slight control or support role through that. So you like your wizards, Scorch. Warden is your tank. Big beefy tank. Slams down his shield, protects friends, literally bull rushes around the battlefield, knocking people around. So if you like to be a bully, Warden. And then there is the Voyager Spark, and Voyager is the scout, the pathfinder. Their whole thing is about marking enemies to help amplify your allies in combat, or to just generally do like weird trickery, like throwing down holograms and swapping people around and things like that. So if you like a kind of a light range supporty role, or like a more crowd control role, Voyager's for you. So those were like the practical ones. And then it got weird.
Yeah.
This
Pox
is where I live.
is the plague robot, specifically designed to do like damage over time builds. So they start by infecting enemies at the beginning of the fight, and then they try and spread it and speed up the infection throughout the fight. Grim is the necromancer robot. They literally, as Eddie depicts in the art, stab these sort of like shards into bodies on the field and reanimate them and control thralls.
Oh, wow.
So like I said,
what is that face, Ryan?
That just like it screams Amelia all over.
It is. It's the one I circled.
Like I said, it got weird when I was like, okay, I've got like the kind of the core concepts. Drifter is the mobile arsenal. They are fantastic. They're sort of a jack of all trades. They have a power that handles each range and also are linked up to the attributes. So you really play around with build customization with Drifter, I think almost more so than any other class. Drifter is also just very powerful.
Yeah.
Then you have Sanguine, which is the vampire robot.
Also strongly considered this one.
Why no? This was the second one I was thinking for me.
Why not have a robot that is not only powered by the sun, but by blood? Sanguine specifically is about also spending some of your own health to get amplified versions of your powers. So you're spending fuel, but also if you want, you can start to spend health. But Sanguine can also do a lot of like stealing health or moving health around and things like that. They also literally turn into a cloud of bats and fly around, which I think is pretty cool.
Oh, amazing.
That's pretty dope.
There's your blood magic, Amelia.
I know. No.
And then
it's tough choices,
those are all the sparks. And then Eddie wanted to do one more very cool one. And we raised the stretch goal money to make Infernal, which is literally the devil. The devil as
amazing.
A robot. My favorite thing about Infernal is that if the supernova effect, if Infernal ever dies, everybody around Infernal gets dragged down to hell with them. So they are just mean, just mean and the devil. So that is
also considered this one.
Amazing.
So yeah, it has been a lot of fun, like conceptualizing the lore, so to speak, of Nova. You know, in my own headcanon, Voyagers were the first sparks because we needed to scout out the area around us, and then we built pyres to defend the Voyagers, and then we realized we needed like wardens to protect the pyres because they got themselves in trouble, and then the Scorch existed, and we're like, okay, we did it. And then humanity got weird and creative, and we're like, well, we have the power. Yeah. Let's make vampire robots.
Well, let's see what else we can do.
And so
we do.
That's exactly what we would do. And that's amazing.
So that's a quick rundown of the 9 sparks that are in Nova.
Oh, so good.
Do you have thoughts, Ryan?
I do have thoughts.
Okay, tell me your thoughts.
Okay, so I'm assuming that you're going to go Grim, Amelia.
Yeah, I do have to say it was a really difficult choice. Usually when we do these things, there's very clear, like, this one is the dark magic one. And that was not the case. I had to choose.
You got 3 dark magic adjacent ones here. Yeah.
I know.
But, I don't know, Spencer, if you had one in mind for yourself.
I kind of bounce back and forth. My go-to, if I was playing this on my, in a campaign, I would be such a Scorch person. I'm a wizardy caster sort of thing. And also Scorch it dips into a little bit into support. And I actually really like playing support characters. But I think that's very much on brand in what I would normally do. So I'm trying to think of what would Spencer do if he broke out of his shell and tried something different.
Oh, we don't do that here. That's not what we do.
So I feel like I am looking at Sanguine because I feel like I don't look at Sanguine enough as a spark, even though I just love the concept of a vampire robot. So I think that's what's drawing my eye right now.
Okay. Oh, that's very interesting because that's the one I was looking at too.
Oh, well, then I will gladly step aside because I'm also very interested in pops.
Ryan.
So
then we can play the 3 that I wanted to play.
We can be the 3 gnarly
I guess I shouldn't say that. There were like 4 that I wanted to choose because I looked at the Infernal too, but I also looked at pops. So
we can be the
Team Amelia.
Yeah, Team Amelia here.
It's all about me today.
Everything's coming up Amelia.
Yeah.
I said that all the stuff in the dusk is spooky and scary, but I think that the dusk would be pretty spooked and scared if they saw a necromancer robot, a vampire robot, and a plague doctor robot come out. They'd be like, oh, actually, they're pretty spooky too.
We're good. We'll stay over here.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So yes, first step is making that difficult decision of which spark draws your eye. And so it sounds like we've accomplished that. So I truly believe that is the hardest part of character creation.
Wonderful.
The next thing to do is to start programming your spark. So those stats that I mentioned earlier, the attributes and your health and fuel, we determined those things. So you don't come preloaded with an attribute range, but instead all 3 of our attributes, sun, moon, and shade, all start at 1. And I should clarify what these numbers mean. Anytime you do something that is described by those attributes, you roll a dice pool of d6s equal to that number, and you keep the highest one. So the higher the number in the attribute, the more dice you roll, meaning the more likely you get to keep a high number and get some good success on what you're accomplishing. So we start with 1 in all of those things. And then we have 4 points to allocate across those attributes how we see fit during this process. The one rule is that you can't have an attribute that is more than 4 points. So you can't dump all 4 points into sun or something like that. You have to at least dip a little bit into another attribute.
Okay. So what does each one do, or is it dependent on what abilities you're using?
It definitely depends on the spark that you chose. So some sparks are very dependent on their attributes, where a lot of their powers are linked to attributes. So when it comes time to doing this step, I oftentimes encourage people to look at your powers and just first things first. Do you see the words sun, moon, and shade popping up in powers or mods, where it deals that amount of harm or hits that many people? Because that immediately lets you know, okay, that's a cool sounding power. And it also tells me I need a lot of moon. So I should definitely at least put 1 more point into moon. Other sparks, that's not really the case. And they're just all flat numbers. And so you can think more so about these attributes being how you accomplish everything outside of combat. So like, let's say, for example, you're trying to hack into a system. You would use Sun to brute force your way into it. You would use like Shade to do like a very slow, methodical process of like trying to crack the password, but you know, that you might run out of time. And then Moon is like the fast hack sort of thing where you use like your intuition to try and guess the password based off of like context clues. So these attributes dictate your actions largely outside of combat. So you can, if your powers aren't linked up to them, you can think, okay, am I acting like really powerfully, or am I acting really like quickly, or am I more of a slow, methodical sort of character when I'm doing stuff outside of combat?
Right.
So yeah, my recommendation is to just take a look at your powers first things first, see if those attributes are called out, and if they are, maybe consider throwing some points into it. You don't have to.
Okay.
And then you know, beyond that, just thinking, do I want to be strong? Do I want to be fast? Do I want to be practiced?
Yeah. All right. So yeah, I'm looking at my Sanguine's powers. And there is a lot that for the Sanguine especially is dealing with, you know, pulling life force and moving health and harm around and all that sort of stuff.
You just have the word blood a lot.
Yeah, you're a weird bloodbender, essentially.
Yeah.
And
so I see. Okay, so here's the transfer health equal to your Sun, deal harm equal to your Shade, deal harm equal to your Moon, depending on the power that I've got in there. Oh, that's interesting.
so, you know, you have access to all four of those powers at all times in combat. And so you look at them and you think, like, which one am I going to be using more, or which one really calls to me a lot? And, you know, if so, I'm going to put, you know, if it's the one that's linked to Shade, like maybe I'll put 1 or 2 points into Shade so that since I know I'm going to be relying on that button a lot, pushing that power, I'm going to be real effective with it.
Yeah. What is the blood effect? Like it says blood effect on here.
Yeah. So for Sanguine, Sanguine's passive is that if you spend one of your health when using a power, you get to activate the blood effect. So it is the amplified version of that power. So like transfusion only usually allows you to move 1 health between things, but if you spend a little bit of your own blood, you can move Sun amount of health. And if you've got 4 points in Sun, you're moving 4 health around. So you're very good at healing or just putting blood in one person and taking it from another.
This is delicious. I love this.
Oh, good.
Delicious.
I'm talking about all this blood. You vampire.
Right. It makes me want to have 4 in all of them.
Yep. And you know, each spark we'll eventually get to this part where you're choosing mods. There you'll have opportunities to add to your attributes. So for example, Sanguine can eventually get +1 to Sun, Moon, and Shade. So you know that you'll be able to boost them a little bit. But yeah, a big part of it is just thinking, what's the thing that really calls to me right now in this moment?
That's amazing. Like this siphon ability deals 1 harm to an enemy and you gain 1 health. But if you spend a health, it affects all close enemies. You just jump into a pile and
exactly
just have fun.
Yeah, and then the turn before that, you jump into that pile of enemies by turning into a swarm of bats that flies into a group of enemies, and then you steal all their health.
Oh, it's so good.
Sanguine's supernova, they turn into a steel coffin, and then they resurrect by appearing nearby somebody and then immediately activating that siphon power that you mentioned. So you come back and just start stealing health right away. You're like, give me my blood back.
Yeah.
I think because 9 don't really key off of anything in particular. So I just figured I would start by deciding on like how I personally feel like I want to do things. Yeah. So I have my Sun is 2, my Moon is 2, and my Shade is 3.
Cool.
Including those like initial 3.
Yeah, and a quick cheat to see if you've got it is if the sum of your attributes equals 7, you've done it. And this has been a helpful trick that I use.
I had to think about it too. I was like, okay, if it was 1 and then a 1 and then 1 and 2 is 4.
Right.
Like it shouldn't have been that hard. It does, you're right, only go up to 7 and nope, still
sometimes we just need that quick trick. My Pox, I imagine them as not particularly a very strong individual, so they just have the 1 in Sun, And I split my other points between Moon and Shade. So they're kind of they can be quick on their feet if they need to be, but also very practical and slow, which like a slow, methodical, but also fast acting thing feels very on brand for a virus themed class.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I think that's what I'm going to go with.
Yeah, I went 3 sun, 2 moon, 2 shade. Because that 3 sun really helps my transfusion ability. So I can kind of see myself a little bit as a macabre healer of the group.
Yeah, exactly. I love
Which
that.
sounds amazing. Call to action.
Yeah, like that.
Oh, this game is just so good. Almost everyone that hears about this game seems to get inspired to actually create a power fantasy game of their own for a different genre, myself included. One guess what genre I went with. But before we let you go for the week, just a couple calls to action and Patreon shoutouts. First up, if you haven't checked out our Patreon lately, we've got some really cool things on there. Our latest offering is a video recording of our Broken actual play that Amelia and I were able to do in person. Broken is, of course, the 2-player tragic romance RPG by Ben Wallace that we covered in a Spotlight episode not too long ago. It was really a fantastic time, and we had a lot of fun with it. And it really proved out how well my new studio was with recording for a couple of people. So really, I think Amelia and I are going to try this again as soon as we are able to, because there's a lot of good games that we could probably play together. Coming up soon, we have a few more pieces of bonus content, which I'm really excited about, all available at the side quest level and higher that I think you'll all really enjoy. You can find out what is all offered by going to patreon.com/charactercreationcast. And speaking of Patreon perks, one of those perks is us personally thanking you every episode until this list gets big enough and we have to split it up between episodes. So without further ado, flying solo here, thanking everybody. Thank you to our first patron, Lieutenant, for your continued support. Eric Bonds, thank you as well for your support. David, aka Tigranosaurus, thank you. Matt Newton, thank you as well. Daryl Holiday II, thank you for your support and all the great comments on our Patreon posts. We really appreciate those. Shadim Cabal, thank you. Caleb, aka the Shyest Barbarian, thank you so very much for your support. Benjamin Sweeney, thank you as well. Lorcan McGinnis, thank you so much. Rob Fletcher, thank you. And Kevin Brown, thank you so very much. And thank you to all of our future patrons. We wouldn't be able to make this show as easily without your assistance, and we really truly appreciate your generosity. That's all we have for today. Tune in next week where we finish our phenomenal character creation for this game with Spencer. It was so very good. Until then, take care of yourselves, stay safe, drink some water, treat yourself to something nice. Don't forget to breathe, and keep making those amazing people. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining us for part 1 of this character creation series. We'll be back in part 2, picking up right where we left off.
Character Creation Cast is a production of the One Shot Podcast Network and can be found online at www.charactercreationcast.com. Head to the website to get more information on our hosts, this show, and even our press kit. Character Creation Cast can also be found on Twitter at CreationCast or on our Discord server at discord.charactercreationcast.com. I'm one of your hosts, Ryan Bolter, and I can be found on Twitter at Lord Neptune or online at lordneptune.com. Our other host, Amelia Antrim, can be found on Twitter at Ginger Reckoning. Music for this episode is used with a Creative Commons license or with permissions from the podcast they originated from. Further information can be found within the show notes. Our main theme music is Hero, remixed by Steve Combs, and is used with a Creative Commons license. This podcast is owned by us under Creative Commons. This episode was edited by Ryan Bolter. Further information for the game systems used and today's guest can also be found in the show notes. If you'd like to support our show, find us on Patreon. Get access to bonus episodes, extra outtakes, and much more at patreon.com/charactercreationcast. Thanks for joining us. And remember, we find the best part of any role-playing game is character creation. So go out there and create some amazing people. We'll see you next time.
Now we gotta read some show blurbs.
Show blurbs.
Show blurbs.
Show blurbs.
Show blurbs.
Character Creation Cast is hosted by the One Shot Podcast Network. If you enjoyed our show, visit oneshotpodcast.com, where you will find other great shows like System Mastery.
System Mastery is a delightful stroll through the history of role-playing games, except the games are terrible and the hosts are real jerks about everything. Join hosts Jeff and John as they explore the weirdest games ever made to talk about what worked, what went wrong, and which Silverhawk was the best. It was Hot Wing. Don't even add us. Find their show at systemmasterypodcast.com or oneshotpodcast.com.